buildup. Really, Edison's plant down here, or any other nuclear plant, is just a way of boiling water. It's no different than the one up in Huntington Beach that uses fossil fuel to create steam from water. Once the steam is made, everything is the same. There's a little difference. The material that's used in a nuclear plant is fatal if it gets out into the atmosphere. The stuff that they use up in Huntington Beach in their plant, it cruddies up the air, it's bad for your health, it's this, it's that, it's the other thing, but it isn't going to kill you. So you go down the road down here and you see these big domes, and they are the containment buildings for the reactors. And they're absolutely necessary, as the Russians found out in about 1980. They built 2 nuclear reactors in a small town called Chernobyl, and they were told not to build them, and they told them if they did build them, build containment buildings that can hold things if they get out of whack. Well, they built a containment building that was something like a chicken coop, and they went along merrily on their way producing electricity. And in about 1980, one of the reactors blew up. It wasn't a nuclear explosion, it was a steam explosion, because that's what they do. They use a nuclear reactor, boil water, make steam, run the turbines, generate electricity. But the pressures in the steam reactors get up to about 2, 3, 4, 5,000 pounds per square inch. And when that lets go in the wrong way, it really develops quite a mess. And in the case of Chernobyl, it blew up the nuclear reactor. It blew radioactive material all over the place. It went as far as Scandinavia, 1,000 miles away, and the little town of Chernobyl is not usable anymore. There's about a 20-mile circle around the reactor building that people can't live in. And unfortunately, animals have come back into that area because there aren't any people there. And now they're finding all kinds of mutation in the animals that come into that area. We found out when we were testing atomic bombs and nuclear bombs over in the Nevada test site what happens. When the wind blows from west to east, which it usually does, it blew over into Utah, into a small town in southern Utah, St. George, and all of a sudden, in small children, the cases of leukemia just shot up, because nuclear energy, radioactive material, has a much greater effect on children than it does on adults. It'll kill anybody, but children pick up leukemia just like this. Another case that you might look at to see how powerful nuclear energy is, it all came out of World War II. Back in World War II, the Germans and the United States were in a race to build an atomic weapon. Luckily, the United States built one. Luckily, the Germans didn't, partly because of that stupid Adolf Hitler. He drove about every nuclear physicist out of Europe. And luckily, they all came to the United States. So he was short-handed when he started on his atomic bomb, and the United States had everybody they needed. The bad part of the atomic bomb is the destruction that they did. They dropped 2 of them on Japan to end the war in 1945. In August of 1945, 2 of these bombs were dropped, one on Hiroshima, one on Nagasaki. They did exactly the same thing. They were detonated about 1,000 feet above the ground, and in about a microsecond on the ground, there was 30 to 50,000 dead people. It was like you had an anthill out in the backyard, and you got a can of Raid, and you went out there and sprayed it real good. All the ants are dead. By the end of 1945, there were about 150,000 people that were dead from those 2 bombs. So when you're playing with atomic energy, which became nuclear energy, you're not playing with illegal fireworks. You got something that is really dangerous if it isn't handled properly. And what the lawsuit is about is the government built the atomic energy system. They built and paid for the 104 reactors that are around the United States. And they were supposed to take all the nuclear waste and put it in a repository where it was safe. Well, in 1982, the Congress passed a law that said that the government would do this. Well, they went ahead and built one huge repository in the old atomic site out in Nevada, about 80 miles north of Las Vegas, in a place called Yucca Mountain. And it's a big deal. It cost about $5 to $10 billion. It's a cave that's a mile deep. It's a big horseshoe. It goes around, and it has alcoves all around it to store the nuclear material. It's been finished for about 5 years. It sits out there vacant. Not one bit of material has been removed: hospital material, industrial material, or the nuclear fuel rods from any of these nuclear generating plants. They sit on the generating plant right now. Every fuel rod that was ever brought to San Onofre is still there for the last maybe 40 years, 30 years, however long the plant is there. They're suspended in a big swimming pool to keep them cool, because nuclear material has an afterlife of about 1,000 years and a real dangerous afterlife of about 100 years. So it's best to get it away from big areas like Los Angeles, Orange County, and put it someplace where it's a little bit safer than it is down here. Also, these plants were made to take a 7.5 earthquake. They seem to have forgotten that in 1961, right along the coast here up in Alaska, they had a little earthquake that was a 9.1. And it dropped the main street in Anchorage, Alaska, about 30 feet down. You walked out of the store, wow, there's my car way down there. It's going to be hard to get that out. And each of the reactors along the coast, San Onofre and Diablo Canyon up by Pismo Beach, are on fault lines. They've had to go back after they built them and redo them to try to bring them up to a greater scale against the Richter scale. The one in Rancho Seco up in the Sacramento Valley, it's not too far off the San Andreas Fault. So it's best to get all of this stuff out of there and put someplace. And it seems rather ridiculous for the government to spend billions of dollars to build this gigantic place over in Nevada and not use it. And the new administration says they're going to restudy it and find out if there aren't better ways of handling it than storing it in the reactor, in the repository in Nevada. So there you are. Here you have your government working for you and working against you, and never quite able to make up its mind as to what it's going to do. So I hope that the letter and the suit by Edison will bring about a solution to a problem that could affect all of us around here. Because as the Japanese people found out in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, if this thing were to go, it's going to be sayonara for a lot of folks.